On Christmas Day 1916, a football match provoked profound change in British society. A team of women from Ulverston Munitions Factory in Cumbria took to the field against a side of female players from the rest of the country, winning 11-5. And the idea caught on. Over the following months, teams emerged from other munitions factories where, in support of the war effort, hundreds of thousands of women were entering the workplace for the first time. Matches were played with the aim of raising money for hospitals and charities for wounded soldiers, and initially, the Football Association and the press were both supportive of these games. Though with the praise, unfortunately, also came the publication of letters condemning players for the unmentionable garments they wore on match days. Yet the sport grew exponentially. By September 1917, so many teams had formed that a nationwide league was underway, and the inaugural final of the Munitionettes Cup was played in May 1918 in front of 22,000 people at Ayerson Park. Victory established Blythe Spartans as one of the best sides of the time, and, with the sport's burgeoning popularity, landmark fixtures added to the growing momentum. A Christmas Day 1917 match, for instance, which was organised by munitionette Grace Sibbott, drew 10,000 spectators and raised the equivalent of £40,000 for the Moore Park VAD hospital. Prior to these events, the First World War had devastated national sports. The Men's Football League and FA Cup were suspended from 1915 to 19, with clubs under pressure to encourage players to volunteer for military service prior to the advent of conscription in 1916. But now a new game had emerged. With teams cheered on by thousands-strong crowds in Preston, Newcastle, Glasgow, Coventry and other industrial areas across the country, women's football had established itself as the sport of the wartime working class. But the end of the war brought new challenges. In 1919, the government dealt a major blow to women's football through its restoration of the Pre-War Practices Act. Women were forced to leave their factory jobs, decimating most of the teams and scattering their players to different parts of the country. Faced by crisis, Dick Care's ladies acted decisively. Manager Alfred Frankland persuaded the factory owners to guarantee jobs for his players, and Dick Cares had big plans, for which they received the owners' financial backing. Recognising that the best players from other teams across the country had found themselves in precarious positions, Frankland set about individually recruiting them. For the price of relocation and leaving their families, the players would be given factory jobs and be part of an all-star football team. The result was one of the strongest women's football sides of all time, which included stars like Lily Parr, goalkeeper Annie Hastie, and captain Alice Woods. Dick Cares became the dominant side of the era, at their peak attracting as many as 35,000 supporters to their games, and their ambition took them even further. From late April to early May 1920, Dick Cares played 4 fixtures against a side drawn from the finest French players of the time. In total, 50,000 spectators witnessed 2 wins and a draw for the home side before the French won a final game 2-1 at Chelsea's Stamford Bridge. France coach Alice Milliet had become a major pioneer for women's sport, and together these teams brought women's football onto an international stage for the first time. The Stamford Bridge game was even covered by Path News, the newsreel technology innovators whose cameras recorded the game's highlights, ensuring an even broader audience. By the end of 1920, Dick Cares were popular enough to attract a crowd of 53,000 at Everton's Goodison Park. This followed a year in which they had played almost 30 domestic games, been on a return tour of France, and in December played the first ever football match held under spotlights. Remarkably, their success had been achieved in an extremely turbulent post-war society. In 1919, hundreds of thousands of soldiers returned from the front lines with unparalleled psychological damage from the trench, only to be met with rocketing levels of unemployment and very little state support. There was widespread anger at the government and employers for the terrible conditions, so much so that millions of workers went on strike from 1919 to 1922. Others directed their anger at those they perceived to have taken their jobs, and in 1919, race riots broke out in port cities like Liverpool and Cardiff. Voting rights changed drastically too. The suffragette movement achieved a partial victory when some women were finally granted the right to vote in 1918, while men gained universal suffrage. In other areas, the government maintained reactionary stances, passing legislation against homosexuality in 1921 and actively encouraging women to return to domestic roles occupied in pre-war Britain. By 1921, women footballers had become the antithesis to this socially conservative atmosphere. They wore shorts, smoked cigarettes, and many cut their hair short, flaunting convention of the time. Further moral panic ensued when it became suspected that women's football teams incubated same-sex relationships. And the success of women's football was also a sore spot for the government. While ex-soldiers in desperate situations were being failed by a lack of state support, women's football stepped up in their place, raising the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of pounds for relief charities. Then, when women's teams began to fundraise for workers during the major 1921 coal strike, the government was undermined to an even greater degree by what increasingly was a force pushing at major social and political boundaries. Resistance got louder. It was claimed that women were unsuitable for football, a view supported by the press, who even published reports from leading doctors providing a contrived medical rationale for such bias. There are strong suggestions too that jealousy was at work. The 1921 FA Cup final had drawn a crowd of 50,018 people, whereas Dick Care's ladies in an exhibition match played a few months earlier attracted a very healthy 53,000. That popularity likely embarrassed the male game. Worse, from their point of view, it threatened male society with another source of female empowerment. On the 5th of December 1921, the FA played their trump card, ordering that, on account of those subjective medical opinions and, more vaguely, claims that gate receipts were being misappropriated, its member clubs should no longer allow women's games to take place on their grounds. And it was devastating, but it was met by retaliation. In the aftermath, over 30 regional teams gathered in Liverpool and, under the presidency of Leonard Bridget, manager and coach of Stoke Ladies, founded the English Ladies Football Association, the ELFA, with the aim of popularising the game among girls and to assist charity. The ELFA even made provisions to alter the game, making it more suitable for female players. Their proposals included reducing the size of the pitch, playing with a lighter football, eliminating charging, and allowing use of hands to protect the face. An exhibition was held under the new laws, with invitations sent to various members of Fleet Street urging them to revise their opinions about the women's game. A further exhibition was held on Boxing Day, to which this time members of the medical profession were invited, giving them the opportunity to reconsider their diagnosis. By 1922, the association members had agreed upon a set of laws for its fledgling association and also devised a structure for its first competition, the English Ladies Football Association Challenge Cup, which Leonard Bridget's Stoke Ladies would win, defeating Doncaster and Bentley 3-1 in front of 2,000 supporters at Cobridge. The FA's ban remained hugely detrimental though. Crowds suffered, and players who had previously performed in the same grounds as their male counterparts were consigned to inferior facilities, condemning the game to the shadows and its stars to relative anonymity. Ultimately, starved of funds and restricted by more natural obstacles, the ELFA would barely last a year before folding, and it would be another 50 years before, in 1971, and at UEFA's insistence, the restriction on women's playing rights was lifted, and a further 22 until in 1993, the women's game was able to operate fully under the Football Association's umbrella.